0.05 maybe. Slide the two pieces of cardboard down, and funnel it.
Yeah, that would probably work. That would probably work. Funnel it.
Yeah, so, if you just got the box of weed. Well, there's a couple of things. If it's got 0.6 is the width that it's got to create some type of trick or some type of circulation. It's got to go the right way for it to kind of swindle up. But like that is a pretty good idea if you just get the funnel kind of action and just fit it inside the tubing, and you can twist it and it'll just.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that might work. If you don't twist it, that's definitely ideal. The weeds, you can kind of create this little strap you can lift it out with. There's one that's 100%. And think about it, you may not need to even use any of these things. Remember, the problem, do you even need to use these items? Yeah, maybe, but I don't know if you'd be able to. You might be able to, right? If you're trying to create a vacuum. So just keep pushing it. Keep pushing.
You just suck in like a straw.
Maybe.
There's no straw, though. Oh,
yeah,
got it.
Keep pushing out. Do you even need to use these items? I think we had some really great, potentially creative. If it did work, they would call us creative solutions for sure. But what if you didn't use them? No, let's hear it. Go ahead.
Risk.
Okay.
Oh, risk taking.
Anybody got it? Let's hear it.
We have a winner.
What is it?
Whoever says it gets the book.
We're all country folk. We're just going to pee in the tube and get it to float.
There you go. That is the 100% solution. That is it. I mean, you have a team of people there. I realize. Now remember, this kind of thinking, and what we want to really illustrate is not necessarily the solution, but that took a little bit of risk-taking, right? That was risk-taking. It's like, you have social norms, right?
Did anybody else?
Something like that.
Did anybody else think of it, but not say it?
Close, yeah. So let's talk about these directions. So group one got directions that are probably the kinds of directions that would stifle creativity. Although group one actually got the solution, right? So again, this is an on-average thing. In large groups, when I've done this with really large groups, typically group two gets this, but it can happen in group one, right? So the ideas of things like the very best puzzle solvers can figure this out. So it already says only certain people can do this, certain people can't. People that receive these directions, what did you feel after reading this? Let's just hear your thoughts.
So what do you want us to do?
Yeah, so what do you want us to do? I'm willing to try it out. What else did you feel?
Constraints.
Yeah, so some of you were eager to jump in. What else were you experiencing when you read these directions, this group?
Competition. Was there any more
stress?
I would just say any more stress or anxiety.
High blood pressure. You know, competition can be good for creativity. Oftentimes in the classroom, it can undermine it, though, sometimes, right?
I want the prize. That's what
I want the prize.
I want the prize.
Right? Time limits, you know, before sharing, test it out. So why did you call me over there to hear that instead of just blurting it out?
Because P was on the list.
Right.
Because it's being videotaped.
Because it's being videotaped, right? There's risk involved. It's like,
Surveillance is one of the things that.
Right? If you go back to this creativity thing right here, and that's often the thing. We're often a barrier to our own creativity. Let me go back one more. Sorry.
Go back.
Oops, I'm sorry.
It's actually the other way. It's the next slide. Keep going. There we go.
If you look at the things that kill creativity in classroom environments, now again, you can't really kill creativity because creativity is part of human life. Unless you are dead, you have creative potential, right? But evaluation expectancy, if you know you're going to be evaluated, you're less likely to take a chance and take a risk because you'll take the tried and true path. If competition's at play, you might be less likely to take those risks. Surveillance, like if there's a video camera in the room, you might not share the solution that will 100% solve the problem because you're being put under surveillance. And if you expect a reward, kind of counterintuitive. You are willing to try to go to the easy path rather than go the outside of the box path to try to get that reward. Okay? So this is kind of the flip side of creativity supportive versus suppressive. Let's look at...
And what's interesting is that this describes all those shows like American Idol. Think about all those singing competitions and now dancing competitions. They're being evaluated, there's a competition, it's on live TV, and there's a reward. So all of these popular things we have to try to find, the next great model singer dancer are actually designed in a way to crush the creativity as much as humanly possible. Something to think about.
And there are still people that will defy it because they have developed enough confidence to do so. But in general, when we're learning, right, it's very fragile, right? So you don't want this kind of environment necessarily in a classroom. I mean, sometimes these things can be okay, but we want to be really sensitive when we're just trying ideas out, when those ideas are raw. That was one of the descriptors we heard of creativity. When the ideas are still raw, you probably don't want to highlight these features. Yes?
So those are all things that teachers use in order to get kids to be motivated
Yes.
to finish the task within the 45-minute period.
Exactly.
How do you get that done?
Exactly, right? So we sometimes use these things to get the kids through to the project. Like, I'll be watching you, right? You have 5 minutes to finish this. This will be on the test, right? Those kinds of things can actually squash creativity. I think one thing to do is to talk about this with your students. Talk about what kinds of... Owning that expertise and this openness can be really helpful, and challenging yourself a little bit and going into the place where it is uncomfortable, where it is uncertain. That, I think, is a necessary step to be a creative teacher and actually to support creativity. I really don't think it's fair for us as teachers, parents, coaches, or leaders to ask students to be creative and take risks, because it's very risky for kids, even little tiny kids, right? If we're not willing to model that ourselves. If we're not willing to be open, to take risks, to trust ourselves, how can we expect our students and our children to do the same? Right? So I think we have to kind of lead by way of example, and it's sometimes scary because risk is involved, but trust your knowledge. All right, so the next P is process. So we have person, then process. Creative problem-solving models date back to at least the early 1920s. And they sometimes have 7 steps or 8 or 4. But basically, if you think about it, there is this kind of idea generation phase. So how do you come up with a new idea? And this kind of goes into design thinking. Somebody mentioned design earlier. So when you're starting out a creative endeavor or project, but it doesn't have to be a physical project, what you want to start with is preparation. There's work involved. And some of you said this about creativity, there's work. I think that there's a lot of kind of mystery around creativity that is always fun and games, but we sometimes forget there's a lot of work involved, and it's unglamorous and it's solitary. I mean, when we write, to write a book, you have to go back to the well, and it's just like, I don't want to write another word, and you have to go and put the work in, right? There's work and commitment. And so part of it is preparation, developing your knowledge, identifying what the actual problem is you're trying to solve. Sometimes what we think is the problem isn't actually it.
I mean, it could be, for example, let's say that all of your friends say, you really need to lose weight. So maybe the problem is how to lose weight. Maybe the problem is I need better friends. There's a lot of ways of thinking about that. Me, nothing.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that's a really good example is sometimes the question we ask, how we define the problem. There's a whole field of study called problem identification or problem finding, right? And so teaching our students when they're developing a project or presentation idea or paper idea, are we even asking the right questions? This takes a lot of work, and it's sometimes unglamorous work. Then there's a time of stepping away and generating new ideas. This is usually the fun stage, the kind of brainstorming. But again, you're not going to have productive brainstorming unless you put in the initial work, right? There's hard work involved up front. Then you step away, start generating ideas, and then try to combine them and start selecting the best ones, testing them out, evaluating them, and sometimes you move back and forth through this process. So this is the general creative problem-solving process. I mean, you could use this in how you design activities in your classroom, right? You could design an entire activity using these various stages.